Have you ever imagined being tested in public, not out of respect for your knowledge, but purely out of prejudice? That's exactly what happened to Dona Helena, a woman with a simple appearance, calm steps, and eyes full of quiet wisdom. She was just sitting at the back of the auditorium, attending an open lecture hosted by one of the most prestigious universities in the region. It was supposed to be a moment of knowledge exchange, listening, and mutual learning. But what unfolded was something else: humiliation. The professor, a man known for his theories and published books, interrupted his lecture to point directly at her. With a sarcastic smile and a superior tone, he asked if she could solve the equation he had just written on the board. The audience laughed. Some exchanged uneasy glances, but Dona Helena simply stood up, with the serenity of someone who had faced far greater challenges than chalk on a board. Society still insists on judging by appearances. If you're not wearing the right clothes, don't speak with the expected accent, or don't have framed diplomas on your wall, you're automatically seen as less. And that's where many get it terribly wrong. Because while some step on stage to be seen, others carry decades of wisdom on their backs, quietly ready to teach far more than just formulas. These are the stories that reveal what distracted eyes fail to see. Dona Helena walked to the board, picked up the chalk, didn't say a word. She just glanced at the equation, made a small note, and began solving it step by step. The professor's voice, once so assured, vanished. Silence filled the room, and when she finished, there was nothing to debate. The solution was perfect, elegant, flawless, the kind of answer only someone with deep knowledge and experience could provide. In that moment, what was meant as mockery turned into applause. What no one there knew, perhaps not even the professor, was that Dona Helena had been one of the first black women to earn a mathematics degree in the 1970s. She taught for over 40 years, worked in rural schools, helped adults learn to read, and helped design educational programs for underprivileged communities. She doesn't have a LinkedIn profile, but she has a lifetime of silent contribution to the nation's education. And let's be honest, that's worth more than any framed title. This is one of those stories that flips a switch, that makes us rethink what success, intelligence, and recognition really mean. How many Dona Helenas go unnoticed every day? How many invisible masters carry solutions we never hear because they don't look the part? How many talents are overlooked for not fitting the mold? The truth is, we live surrounded by wisdom that doesn't wear designer clothes, it wears experience. The professor, visibly embarrassed, tried to regain control of the room with technical comments about her method. But it was too late. Authority had shifted, not by force, but by merit. Dona Helena handed the chalk back, smiled, and returned to her seat, as if nothing had happened. But for those paying attention, something had definitely changed. And it wasn't just what was on the board. A student recorded the scene and shared it on social media. It spread quickly. Within days, it had thousands of views, emotional comments, people sharing their own stories of invisibility, resilience, and silent resistance. At the heart of it all, a woman who never asked for a spotlight, only respect. The lesson here isn't about equations, it's about humility, about knowing when to be quiet and listen to those who have much to teach, about understanding that wisdom isn't measured by age, clothes, or status, but by the ability to touch, transform, and enlighten. Dona Helena wasn't seeking applause, but by showing us the value of listening, respect, and quiet depth, she received far more than claps. She earned recognition. And maybe, just maybe, you've lived something similar. Have you ever judged someone by their appearance? Ever doubted someone's ability just because they didn't look intellectual enough? Ever dismissed advice from someone whose wisdom came not from books, but from life? Then maybe it's time to reflect. These stories exist for a reason: to hold up a mirror, to stir sleeping consciences, to invite us to listen more and judge less. Because in the end, the professor's biggest mistake wasn't testing Dona Helena. It was failing to recognize the greatness standing right in front of him. And you? Are you ready to see beyond appearances? Ready to recognize teachers where no one's looking? If so, the world will start to feel much richer, deeper, and full of stories that deserve to be told. It's no surprise that many stories of prejudice begin cloaked in authority. That open lecture seemed like a celebration of knowledge, until the professor, full of himself, targeted a quiet woman in the audience. It sounded like a challenge, but it was really meant to humiliate. The reason? Her simple appearance. His white coat became both shield and mask for a prejudice disguised as intellect. As the applause echoed for his theories and formulas, he spotted Dona Helena, seated, discreet, attentive. He smirked and asked, "Do you think you can solve this on the board?" The audience laughed. It was like offering a 5,000-piece puzzle to a child. But what he didn't know was that this woman carried stories that could humble any inflated ego. Here's something to think about. How many times have you seen someone judged for how they dress, where they sit, or how they speak? It happens in meetings, interviews, customer service. It seems small, but builds huge walls between people. The most dangerous part, when that prejudice comes from those who should inspire, not humiliate. So, what did Dona Helena do next? Few knew, but that woman with the serene posture had a past worthy of a book full of stories, the kind that silence arrogance. In the 80s, she was one of the most acclaimed applied mathematics scholars in the country, internationally awarded, cited in journals, praised at conferences, until life presented her with another equation, taking care of her family. She gave up the spotlight to care for her sick mother and siblings. She didn't disappear. She simply chose silence, where others crave applause. Her knowledge was never retired, just redirected. While some saw an ordinary woman in the audience, others, had they looked deeper, would have seen a brilliant mind at rest, not obsolete. How many similar stories pass unnoticed in banks, on buses, in school hallways? How many genius minds have you overlooked? That's the turning point, when simplicity is a conscious choice, not a sign of lack. Dona Helena wasn't there to prove anything, and maybe that's why she proved everything. And we haven't even reached the moment when she rises and turns mockery into reverence. Because when she begins to speak, oh, that's when the magic happens. She stood slowly, adjusted the scarf around her neck, and walked to the board. The professor crossed his arms. The audience murmured. Some laughed, others filmed. But with just the first stroke of chalk, everything shifted. Dona Helena began solving the problem like she was telling a story. With precise logic, the clarity of someone who had taught those who truly wanted to learn. In minutes, the equation was revealed, not with flair, but with an elegance that filled the room with reverence. The once mocking audience now held its breath. The silence was so heavy you could hear the chalk scrape. And the professor? Frozen. That woman who 5 minutes earlier was just one more had just given a masterclass in humility without raising her voice. That's what so many stories teach us. True power doesn't shout. It reveals itself in gestures, in wisdom, and sometimes in a single look. That moment was more than a correct answer. It was a role reversal, a narrative shift, a lesson in humanity during a math lecture. And it's curious. Sometimes the quietest one in the room is the one remembered for generations. What happened next was even more surprising. Not everyone in the audience was just a guest. Among them was the institution's director. Upon hearing Dona Helena's full name, she nearly fell out of her chair. She instantly recognized the woman behind the academic articles she had studied, the awards she had read about in old papers. She stood up without hesitation, took the microphone, and with rare humility for someone in power, publicly apologized. She said what few dare to. We were terribly wrong. But she didn't stop there. With a firm voice, she invited Dona Helena to lead a new mentorship program for underprivileged girls, a project that had been on paper, waiting for someone with soul, experience, and heart. Helena accepted, with a smile full of compassion and irony. And so began one of the most beautiful stories on that campus, the rebuilding of a bridge between knowledge and empathy. It was a symbolic moment, but real. One of those scenes we usually only see in movies and think are exaggerated, until we witness it with our own eyes. The director didn't just restore the dignity of the institution, she opened the door to something much bigger. And if you thought the professor stayed silent until the end, just wait to see how he reacted next. The professor stood there, his face paler than the chalk he had used on the board. The confident posture of someone used to commanding the room had vanished, replaced by a restless expression. And for the first time that afternoon, he did something truly noble. He asked to speak, not to teach, but to acknowledge his mistake. He admitted that his actions had been driven by arrogant impulse, that he judged before listening, and that, in that moment, he had learned one of the greatest stories of his academic life. He didn't try to sugarcoat it or play the victim. He simply bowed his head and publicly committed to change. And more, he accepted Helena's invitation to join the mentorship project, but this time as a student. A gesture that, while symbolic, proved that where there is courage to admit failure, there is also room for growth. Sometimes teaching means stepping aside and letting someone with more life experience lead the way. What started as confrontation turned into collaboration. And more than that, it became a sign that it's possible to rebuild relationships even after the deepest embarrassments. Because true knowledge is humble. And wisdom, real wisdom, knows no age, no fixed titles. But hold on, there's more. When the internet found out about this story, the world stopped to listen. In less than 24 hours, the video of the class went viral. Millions of views, likes, and comments poured in from all corners of the world. Some people were moved, others outraged, others deeply grateful. What was meant to be an episode of humiliation turned into one of the most inspiring stories on the internet that month. Dona Helena, with her calm voice and sharp math skills, became a symbol of quiet resistance. A living reminder that knowledge cannot be measured by appearance. And it wasn't just the public who responded. Universities, NGOs, educators, and even companies began sharing the video as a symbol of humility, competence, and transformation. Dona Helena began receiving messages from women who, like her, had left school to care for others, but now felt inspired to return. Not because someone told them it was possible, but because someone showed them it was. Real stories have that power. They don't just inspire, they liberate. And the most beautiful part, Dona Helena didn't use her fame to show off. She used it as a megaphone for something greater, education as a tool for inclusion. And that's when an even bolder idea was born, one that would go beyond the classroom or that auditorium stage. She wanted to reach those who no longer even dreamed of starting over. And soon, you'll see exactly how she did it. The impact wasn't limited to social media. The university itself, previously indifferent, found itself at the center of a national debate. And it chose to act. It launched a new institutional campaign against ageism and appearance-based prejudice, using Dona Helena's story as the symbol of this turning point. The campaign wasn't just an apology, it was a call to action. Posters with bold phrases lined the hallways, and a new series of lectures began to take shape. And the most symbolic act of all, the renovation of an old mathematics lab, long underused, now renamed Helena's Hall of Knowledge. A modern space, open to the public, offering free activities, mentoring classes, and community discussions. A meeting place for ideas that once had no space. The stories of resilience, once hidden, now had a home, facing those who thought they already knew everything. The movement grew. Other institutions began to replicate the model, inspired by the courage of that one woman. It was no longer just about solving one equation. It was about what happens when knowledge meets humility, and they choose to walk side by side. And Dona Helena, far from stopping, already had another plan in mind. Because she knew her next students wouldn't be in auditoriums, but scattered across the world. Dona Helena understood that the real reach of her message went beyond the cameras and the room named in her honor. She wanted to reach those who, like she once had been, remained silent. Women who had left school, who were invisible in spaces of knowledge, who for years had been told, "This isn't for you." And so the free online basic math course was born, tailored for those who thought it was too late. A project driven by purpose, not prestige. The course wasn't about numbers, it was about liberation. Using simple language, everyday examples, and a nurturing teaching style, Dona Helena turned equations into bridges. And the most touching part, she used her own stories as teaching material. She explained fractions using cake recipes, taught geometry through fabric cutting, and broke down algebra with real-life situations like splitting household bills or managing family budgets. Soon, women of all ages started signing up. Some watched on their phones while cooking, others printed materials and studied at night after putting the kids to bed. It was the kind of quiet revolution that grows along the margins until it becomes unstoppable. But perhaps the most powerful moment was still to come, and it came in the form of a single sentence that silenced even the harshest critics. When a journalist asked her how it felt to be humiliated in public, perhaps expecting a rant, a wound, or a moral lesson, Dona Helena simply smiled calmly and answered, "I wasn't humiliated. He just revealed who he was. I already knew who I was. That was it." 3 lines that exploded in shares, became t-shirts, school murals, and most importantly, a mirror for many to reassess their own judgments. Some stories don't need to be shouted. One well-spoken truth is enough to shake foundations. The sentence went viral, but not because of marketing, because of truth. Those who have felt the sting of contempt know how easy it is to go quiet and how hard it is to stay whole inside. But there she was, whole. And her response wasn't just for her, it was for thousands of others who had never been seen. And now, because of one class, we're finally being heard. That's the power of knowing who you are. No one can take it away. The phrase became a symbol. In schools, companies, conferences. It was used in campaigns about women's empowerment, dignified aging, and even in teacher training programs. Because in the end, that line summed up something many still need to learn. Your worth doesn't depend on who's looking at you. And for those who still doubt, there's one last question. The final scene of this story wasn't filmed, but it's the one that stuck most in the memory of those who lived it. A packed room, a transformed professor, a smiling woman, and hundreds of people rethinking their beliefs. The question that lingered in the air, and still echoes today, is simple, yet powerful. How many geniuses has the world ignored because of a piece of clothing, a tone of voice, or a zip code? How many stories were shut down before they even began? To underestimate someone is like tearing out a book's pages without reading a single line. It's a costly mistake, not just for the one who judges, but for an entire society that loses talent, ideas, and solutions. In Dona Helena's case, there was still time to make it right. But how many times is there not? How many silent voices are still being muffled in classrooms, offices, bank lines, and job interviews just because they don't look like the ideal profile? And the most intriguing part is that this lesson isn't new. It's in parables, ancient proverbs, movies, books. But it still needs to be lived, told, and shared, like this one. Because as long as there are people being underestimated, there will always be a chance to rewrite the ending of these stories. And you, who made it this far, might just be the one to write the next. You know, the kind of lesson that doesn't come from books or degrees. The one that arrives quietly without fanfare, but leaves deep marks. Well, this is one of those stories. And maybe as you read it, you'll realize you've lived something similar. Or worse, you've been the author of the mistake without even noticing. Dona Helena had hands marked by time, and a posture that combined gentleness with strength. Her gaze was serene, yet carried the weight of someone who had weathered more storms than most could bear. She was always there, sitting on the same park bench every morning, with her crochet in her lap and a cup of coffee in hand. Many walked past her as if she were part of the scenery, a sweet old lady, but invisible. Until one day someone decided to listen. A young intern, new to the neighborhood, approached her out of curiosity, and in just a few minutes of conversation he found out that this lady had been one of the first women to teach mathematics at a public university in the 1960s, that she had a PhD from France, that she had spoken at the UN, that she raised 3 children on her own while fighting prejudice both in and outside the classroom. He was stunned. And when he told his co-workers, the reaction was the same. But she doesn't look like all that. And that's exactly where the danger lies. How many stories do we miss because we only look at the surface? How often do we judge a book by its cover, a professional by their outfit, a woman by her age, a young person by their tattoos, a service worker by their job title? The truth is hard, but it needs to be said. We live surrounded by wisdom disguised as simplicity, and we ignore it every single day. Dona Helena never asked for recognition. She never used her titles as a shield. She simply lived her life, knowing that those who constantly feel the need to prove something still haven't understood their own worth. And that's exactly what makes her presence so powerful. She teaches without speaking, and transforms without having to raise her voice. That's what we need to reflect on. Because as long as society keeps treating knowledge as something exclusive to those who look the part, we'll keep wasting the most valuable thing in human relationships: genuine exchange. How many times have you doubted your own abilities just because you didn't fit the mold? Have you ever felt small in a room full of people in suits? Have you stayed quiet for fear of sounding unprepared? Then maybe this story is also about you, and about the strength you haven't yet recognized in yourself. There's one important detail that few people notice. The wisest people we know are often the most humble, because they've lived long enough to understand that titles may impress, but actions inspire. That what really matters isn't what you show off, it's what you share. So instead of judging, how about asking? Instead of turning away, how about pulling up a chair? You might be surprised by the stories that unfold, and who knows, your greatest lesson might come from where you least expect it. In fact, here's a little challenge. When was the last time you truly listened to someone without interrupting, without filtering their words through their appearance, their job, or their age? Maybe that's the root of so much that's missing today. Listening, respect, genuine curiosity. Because at the end of the day, what truly transforms us isn't fancy speeches. It's real, honest encounters. And you know what's most beautiful about this story? Dona Helena never needed a stage. But today, she's inspired thousands without ever leaving the park bench. And that only happened because someone decided to look beyond. Because someone had the courage to listen before judging. And maybe next time that someone could be you. If this touched you, drop a comment. When was the last time you were underestimated? Or underestimated someone without realizing it? And if you want to keep learning from stories like this, stories that touch, awaken, and change how we see the world, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because here, we don't just tell stories to move people, we tell them to transform.